Good day, everyone. My name is Dave Schumacher. I am the QA Director with Alturas Analytics, located in Moscow, Idaho. My presentation asks the question, are remote audits here to stay? Well, spoiler alert, we've opened the box on this during this past year, and they will likely remain with us because we are a product of our own success. Since remote audits are likely to remain as a tool for auditors, one of my objectives with this presentation includes how to conduct a successful remote audit. We've conducted numerous remote audits and in the process have learned a few things along the way to make them a worthwhile endeavor for many companies to consider. I'll also review the FDA remote audit guidance that came out just a couple months ago, and finally, we'll describe why remote audits are likely here to stay. Remote audits have actually been around for quite a while, but were usually reserved for special circumstances and a matter of last choice. But all that changed with the advance of the COVID-19 pandemic last year. And every regulatory inspection was set back with this FDA statement on March 18, 2020, when they announced they would be scaling back domestic inspections and directed its employees to begin teleworking from home. Industry at the same time was canceling on-site inspections and rapidly figuring out how to conduct remote audits and if they would even work. So how does one conduct a remote audit? Where's the manual? There's no playbook to follow. There were no YouTube or TikTok videos to learn from. There were no federal guidance documents to refer to. There was virtually no history to call upon. Industry had to learn how to conduct remote audits that would assure the integrity of the actual inspection and provide assurance to their respective management teams that the supplier is indeed qualified to provide services. For many, it was simply throwing something together and hoping for the best. So late March of last year, while the pandemic was just unfolding, my colleagues put our heads together to map out a basic plan. Our initial plan incorporated Zoom, even though it was a relatively immature video sharing platform at the time, but it was rapidly gaining popularity. So we decided we would have an initial group meeting with all the key staff and auditors when we initiated a remote audit. We would provide a cell phone video tour, and then we would share PDF documents or other types of documents by passing screen control on Zoom to the auditor for review. And finally, we would do a closeout meeting with all the key staff members and the auditors online via Zoom. That was our basic plan. Well, little did we know that we'd actually test key components of our plan with an FDA visit in April of 2020. Alturas was one of the FDA's first remote audits. It lasted 16 glorious days. It operated much like we had initially envisioned, with two key exceptions. The FDA was in control of the WebEx video platform, and also documents were uploaded to a box.com file sharing application. At the start of the audit, a 482 was presented at the initial meeting, and then at the close, a 483 was issued by the FDA inspectors. Alturas responded to the 483 within 15 days, and the EIR and closeout letter was issued on June 25th. So it was pretty quick turnaround. So taking our experience from the FDA inspection and leading over 20 remote inspections during the course of the pandemic, we have refined our processes to make them much more successful. So let's go beyond the basics and identify what has really worked well for Alturas. First off, establish a time frame that recognizes the differing time zones. Alturas is actually in the Pacific time zone, but many of our customers are on the East Coast. So when do you meet? Well, we typically compromise on the start time with our East Coast customers so they can get a reasonable start to the day. What happens with international customers when one has a greater disparity in time zones? Well, we haven't crossed that bridge yet, but we'll have to find some way to accommodate everyone. Make sure you have a solid Wi-Fi connection throughout the facility that's being audited. You know, the last thing you need are gaps or weak signal and breakups because of a weak Wi-Fi. Similar to that, ensure you have plenty of bandwidth at the facility and also at the auditor's location during peak periods. Remote audits are not standardized, so be sure to summarize the process up front. You know, we typically send out an email to the auditor describing how the audit's going to roll out and the expectations so they can prepare on their end. Know how the application functions, whether it be Zoom, WebEx, Teams, or other platforms. New features are continuously being added to improve functionality. Zoom has come a long ways from when we first started using their application over a year ago. Make sure you use a good quality video camera. You know, there's a reason inexpensive cell phones are cheap. You don't want to use a cheap video to be viewing your audit through, because you're going to have problems. Make sure you understand lighting and camera angles as you're going through your various areas. Something that we do up front with our remote audits is to provide several documents to the auditor so they can print out and have in front of them if they wish. You know, quite often your file sharing applications like Box or OneHub that we use, you can prevent printing and downloading from going on. But sometimes the auditor needs to have these documents in front of them so they can easily refer to them. So we send those directly by email and they can print out. Something that you need to practice on is close-ups. It sounds like a pretty simple process, but it can be challenging. You got to be steady and you have to move slowly. You know, if you're trying to do a close-up of a label on a bottle or document or instrument ID or something like that, you really got to slow down and allow the camera time to focus on those things. Consider using a handheld gimbal device, now, such as the one shown here in the on the PowerPoint slide. That gimbal allows us to easily quick from portrait to landscape modes with a flick of a switch on the gimbal device. It really helps to stabilize the image and provides, you know, better quality overall for the viewers. We typically use a 2-person team for video, 1 person in front of the camera showing various features and answering questions from the auditors, and then a videographer. The person speaking is not necessarily a few inches from the cell phone, but rather a few feet. So speaking, you know, can be a challenge at times, and also just hearing questions from the auditor or from the viewers can be a challenge. So we're utilizing this a Bluetooth device with a microphone and speaker all around. It's designed actually for a conference room setting. We've attached a handle to this, so the speaker can easily hang on to it or pass it off to another individual during the tour. It's something that's worked out pretty well for us. Be aware of noisy environments, you know, during the video tour, you know, that will make listening or speaking difficult. Warn viewers up front if you're entering a manufacturing area or freezer room or something with, you know, maybe a lot of loud pumps or something going on, that you may have difficulty speaking or listening, and to save their questions, you know, for when you exit out on the other side. Auditors tend to approach remote audits in different ways. Some want to be largely left alone while they review documents and save questions for the end, while others prefer to ask questions as they go along. Be prepared to adapt to the auditor's preferences. There's no right or wrong in this. Be aware of what is behind you. Even a virtual background can fail at times, so you don't need to show someone going to get their cup of coffee popping in and out of your video screen. Use an online file sharing site to provide access to documents. such as box.com. We currently use one hub, but there are many others out there that allows auditors to view documents securely and not be able to print or download. This also allows you to give auditors access to the documents before the Zoom meeting, so they can preview everything and come to the Zoom meeting with questions and make it more productive. Be sure key individuals are available and have a link to the online meeting. It's nothing worse than, say your auditor wants to speak with the IT director, but you have to mail the IT director the Zoom link and password and everything. Well, provide that to them up front. So all you got to do is tell the IT director, hey, can you get online? The auditor wishes to speak with you. During a virtual tour, be aware of confidential information that may appear on desktop whiteboards, your workbenches, or other areas. You don't need to be sharing that kind of information with the world out there. Recognize that remote auditing is probably going to be slower than an on-site inspection. Adjust your expectations accordingly and perhaps allot some extra time to complete. Also understand that many qualifications, equipment qualifications, validations, or maintenance records may be paper-based. So create PDFs beforehand if you have them or have the ability to generate very quickly to share. Something that the host can always do is predict what an auditor may ask for and have readily available. You're going to look at SOPs, but they also may ask for your quality manual, the business continuity plan, perhaps some testing of various processes and that are commonly requested by auditors. Have those available and ready to upload on a minute's notice. Just a couple of months ago, the FDA provided a 13-page guidance document on remote agency audits. There are two important items I'll note up front. Remote audits are voluntary, and also the policy only remains in effect during the health emergency, however long that lasts. We don't know yet. The FDA will apply risk management methods to how they conduct remote audits. How are they going to prioritize certain industries or companies? You'll first be contacted by a phone call from the FDA to inquire if you're capable of hosting a remote evaluation, as we were. They will ask you about your capabilities, your time. Do you have the necessary Wi-Fi and bandwidth to host a virtual inspection by the agency? Contrary to what we experienced, there will be no 42 or 43 issue. Time zone differences and if translators are needed will be asked about during the initial phone call with the agency. And the agency then will also provide methods for sharing requested information, including documents and online streaming technology. They'll follow up with emails with you. Do you have technological limitations that could impair or prevent the FDA's remote evaluation of the facility? For instance, if you live in an area with limited high-speed internet, that could be a challenge for the FDA. So share that information up front with them. You don't have to necessarily agree to a remote inspection if you don't have the capabilities to do so. Be honest. Make sure you check the internet connection throughout the facility to verify that you have the necessary signal strength via Wi-Fi and is adequate to support live streaming video and audio during the actual remote evaluation. FDA expects appropriate staff to be available at scheduled times for interview and virtual interactions, whether they're on-site or off-site. Make sure you have your key individuals available at their request. For security reasons, the FDA will use its own IT platforms and equipment to host the visual interactions. For instance, they are currently using Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and Adobe Connect. Obviously, they're not using WebEx as we experienced. If they will provide a secure means to send requested information during the remote interactive evaluation, that could be email addresses or secure file sharing sites like box.com. On a side note, keep track of document uploads along the way so you can easily search for when it was uploaded. During our inspection, we uploaded, I think it was like 130 some documents, and there were times we needed to refer back or confirm that something was indeed uploaded. So keep a list right away when you start, and so it's something that keep a list that's searchable. If you do upload any documents, the FDA would prefer that it be in a searchable PDF format. Obviously something like SOPs or work instructions, other sorts of documents like that. Yes, make those word searchable, because quite often they will focus on keywords and be able to search for that, because it's very helpful to them. Obviously for some things like flow charts or schematics, you can't do that. So you just scan it in, and the agency will deal with it. At the completion of the remote evaluation, the FDA will have a closeout meeting with your management. And during this meeting, the FDA will present a list of observations, if any, and describe any observation in sufficient detail to enable your understanding and foster an appropriate response. Of course, like a 483, you do have 15 days to respond to the verbal observations, and for that response to be included in the final evaluation before issuing the final report. If the agency finds some observations that may put the public at risk, that could trigger an immediate on-site investigation. And then remember too that the FDA will issue a report that is subject to the FOI, so as well as your responses. So keep that in mind when responding. May 5th of this year, the FDA issued a report entitled the Resiliency Roadmap for FDA Inspectional Oversight, providing an overview of the agency's activities during the COVID-19 pandemic and plans for inspection operations in the future. The FDA postponed domestic and foreign inspections in March 2020 in response to the pandemic, and began domestic inspections again in July of 2020 using a rating system to prioritize those facilities when inspections were most needed. This table summarizes the number of FDA inspections completed in fiscal year 2019 to current. You can see in 2019 there were 18,000 planned inspections, of which they completed 94%. In 2020, there were 21,000 planned inspections, but they only completed 61%. In fiscal year 2021, there's 26,000 planned inspections, and you can see from the table they are way behind. So, but fiscal year 2021 is still ongoing. So, using the remote inspections is a tool that will be used to help them catch up. Part of that report is a table showing how the agency is going to prioritize inspections in an effort to eventually catch up. I'm only showing a portion of this table here, and the one division, the human animal food, showing the criteria for the tier 1, the mission critical, tier 2, which is higher priority, and tier 3, which is lower priority. Obviously, there are some inspections that are required by law to be completed, so they don't have a choice in those. But I'll refer you to the report, for the full details on how they're going to prioritize inspections. So in the end, do you perform an on-site inspection, or do you perform a remote inspection? Well, let's take a look at some of the comparisons here. In an on-site inspection, you have a limited number of participants who usually travel to the site. In a remote inspection, your participation is almost unlimited. Well, unlimited might be a bit too far, but certainly you can invite more individuals who ordinarily would not travel to to the site. They may just stop by for a quick conversation or have a question, and then they're done. In an on-site inspection, obviously the entire facility is clearly clearly visible. During a remote inspection, visibility is limited by what the camera is pointed at. For an on-site inspection, start and end times is usually driven by the business hours. For remote inspections, start and end times can be challenging depending upon the time zones, particularly if it's international. Something an auditors like to do, particularly with on-site, is observe body language. When they're the people that they're speaking to. Is the person being totally truthful or not? Sometimes they can tell. Just like the FDA can also tell too by in their body language if they're being totally truthful in everything that's being communicated. It's difficult to do in a remote inspection. And on-site inspections allow auditors to lay out multiple binders or whatever, put post-it notes and other things. They can easily refer back and forth across different types of documents. Obviously, in a remote inspection, they're using PDF copies, so that's a lot more difficult to perform. Another critical tool for auditors, for on-site inspections, is the ability to use all your senses, not just your visual, but you can use your sense of smell. You can use your hearing. If you're walking into an archive room and it smells musty, that's probably not a good sign. So obviously with a remote inspection, you're limited simply to your visual sense. With an on-site inspection, obviously too, you also have greater security of your intellectual property materials. For remote inspections, you have to trust the online viewers to abide by the confidentiality agreements. For an on-site inspection, there's no risk of internet security. We've all heard about Zoom bombing or other possible hacking that can occur with remote inspection. So make sure you talk to your IT group to minimize that type of problem. One of the big advantages of a remote inspection is that Zoom participants can join from almost anywhere, whether it be down the hallway or different building, or could be international. It's very easy to invite other participants in via on a Zoom application or something similar. Make sure your computers have a good microphone and video camera. Internet connectivity usually is not an issue with on-site inspections, but bandwidth is critical to avoid screen freeze. For some applications, for instance, looking at chromatograms on via analyst or say a limb system or whatever, if it's on-site, the auditor can take control of, if they have training, they can take control of the screen and navigate on their own, or certainly look over the shoulder of a trained operator on site. In the remote inspection, that can be a little more challenging. The host will probably have to do the navigation, but it's a little bit harder to perform, but it can be done. Obviously, during the live tour, your conversations are very interactive with individuals, going throughout the facility versus, video tour, might be live or could be recorded, thereby limiting any types of interactions. During an on-site, you only have document access while you're there, but during a remote inspection, document access can be before and after the audit via secured file sharing site. We actually provide auditors access to documents a few days before the Zoom meetings to give them time to preview SOPs and other key documents so they can come to the table prepared. Obviously, for a remote inspection, you don't have to worry about flights or hotel or car rentals or meals or anything like that that has to be typically taken care of versus an on-site inspection. And also with a remote inspection, you don't have to worry about lost time in airports, planes, or traveling by car. So an auditor's productivity could actually increase with a remote inspection. So you add up all the pros and cons of on-site versus remote audit. What do? You know, what type of inspection are you going to be performing? Is this an initial qualification or a follow-up? Can the type of audit be adequately performed remotely? Are there time or financial constraints to consider? Does the facility have the infrastructure and the ability to conduct a good remote audit? Most of us initially saw the use of Zoom or other online video sharing sites for remote audits as a hindrance when we first had to use this. But once we got over the initial hurdles and figured out how to use Zoom, then we accepted and understood the limitations it had to offer. Many of us are probably tired of Zoom meetings and now look forward to the concept of actual face-to-face discussions, but Zoom will probably remain in our tool belt and utilize the strengths it has to offer and mitigate the negative aspect. So in conclusion, remote audits can be successfully executed in many situations. Granted, it won't fit all, but certainly for Alturas, it has worked successfully. You'll have to weigh the pros and cons of each situation with the information I just presented. Remote audits are likely to continue for vendor assessments. Perhaps it may become a hybrid. You'll do some on site, but you do some remotely. And finally, the FDA has laid the groundwork for remote inspections through the emergency use declaration in March 2020. This could become a permanent tool, but I'm no legal scholar, but there could be some considerations to overcome once the health emergency is no longer in effect. But I'll let the FDA figure that one out, but don't be surprised if it does continue. And certainly I want to thank the following individuals at Alturas for their contributions towards the remote audit process and the content of this presentation. And you are welcome to contact me for further questions about this discussion. Thank you very much. Have a good day.